When Isabella Morales walked into the most elite military training facility in the country, every hardened soldier in the room took one look at her and started laughing. This quiet woman with discount gear and trembling hands was about to attempt something that had broken countless elite warriors before her. What happened next would shatter every record on the books and leave an entire room of Navy SEALs speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Lejeune Special Operations Training Center as Isabella "Izzy" Morales stepped out of her weathered Honda Civic. The vehicle looked absurdly out of place among the rows of massive pickup trucks, tactical SUVs, and military vehicles that dominated the parking lot. Each one seemed to scream money, status, and serious intent. Her car, with its faded paint and a bumper sticker from a local veteran support group, whispered of struggle and determination. Izzy stood for a moment, her breath visible in the crisp North Carolina air, and surveyed the imposing concrete and steel structure before her. The Camp Lejeune Special Operations Training Center wasn't just any military facility, it was where the elite came to prove they belonged among the most elite. SEALs, Force Recon Marines, Green Berets, and other special operations personnel traveled from across the country to attend the Advanced Precision Marksmanship course. For most, it was a career-defining opportunity. For Izzy, it represented something far more personal. She adjusted the worn canvas strap of her grandfather's old military surplus bag, feeling the weight of everything inside. Unlike the other participants who would arrive with custom-fitted cases and thousands of dollars worth of precision equipment, Izzy's gear told a different story. Her rifle case, held together with duct tape and hope, contained a basic military-issue weapon she'd purchased used from a retiring Marine. Her scope was functional but outdated, her shooting mat was a hand-me-down, and her ammunition was the cheapest match grade she could afford after saving for months. At 32, Isabella Morales had already lived more lives than most people. Twice her age. Born to immigrant parents who worked double shifts to make ends meet, she joined the Army at 18, not out of patriotic fervor, but because it was her only path to college and a better life. She'd served her country with quiet distinction as a military police officer, deployed twice to Afghanistan, and earned her bachelor's degree through night classes and online courses while on active duty. But life after the military had been harder than the service itself. The transition to civilian life hit her like a freight train. Despite her discipline, work ethic, and veterans' preference in hiring, she found herself bouncing between retail jobs and part-time work. The VA disability rating from an IED incident that left her with chronic back pain provided a small monthly check, but it wasn't enough to live on. She'd moved back in with her aging parents, sleeping in her childhood bedroom, watching her civilian peers advance in careers while she struggled to find her place in a world that seemed to have moved on without her. The shooting range had become her sanctuary. Every weekend, she'd drive to the local public range with her carefully budgeted ammunition allowance, practicing the marksmanship skills the Army had taught her. It was there, among the paper targets and the familiar smell of gunpowder, that she felt like herself again. The precision, the focus, the moment of perfect stillness before the shot, it was meditation and therapy, rolled into one. When she'd first seen the advertisement for the Advanced Precision Marksmanship course, she'd laughed out loud. The course fee alone was more than she made in 2 months at her current job stocking shelves at a big box store. The prerequisites were intimidating: military or law enforcement experience, demonstrated marksmanship proficiency, and equipment that met strict specifications. It seemed designed for people with military careers and unlimited budgets, not struggling veterans working retail to pay rent. But something about the challenge called to her. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was desperation, But she couldn't shake the idea that this course represented more than just advanced training. It was a chance to prove that her service meant something, that her skills had value, that she belonged. Somewhere in this world that often felt like it had no place for her, she'd applied anyway, submitting her military records, shooting scores from local competitions, and a personal statement that took her weeks to write and rewrite. The acceptance letter had arrived 3 months later, along with a payment plan that would stretch her finances to the breaking point. She'd taken on extra shifts, sold her grandmother's jewelry, and even started a small GoFundMe campaign that raised just enough to cover the remaining balance. Now, standing in the parking lot of the most prestigious marksmanship training facility in the military, she felt the familiar cocktail of excitement and terror that had accompanied every major decision in her life. The same feeling she'd had stepping off the bus at basic training, boarding the plane for her first deployment, walking across the stage at graduation. The sense that she was about to attempt something that might be beyond her capabilities, but that the attempt itself was what mattered. The building's glass doors reflected her image back at her, a small woman in simple jeans and a plain black t-shirt, carrying gear that looked like it had seen better decades. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face free of makeup, her expression a mixture of determination and barely controlled anxiety. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who didn't belong here but was too stubborn to stay away. Taking a deep breath that tasted of morning air and military diesel fumes, Isabella Morales picked up her rifle case, adjusted her bag one more time, and walked toward the entrance. She had no idea that within hours, every person in that building would know her name, or that the next few days would change not just her own life, but challenge every assumption about what it meant to be elite. The glass doors swung open with a soft hydraulic hiss, and she stepped inside, ready to discover whether her quiet determination could stand up to the loudest critics of all the ones who had already decided she didn't belong. The interior of the Camp Lejeune Special Operations Training Center was everything Isabella had expected and worse. Polished concrete floors stretched beneath fluorescent lights that seemed to illuminate every flaw, every sign of wear on her. Equipment, every indication that she didn't belong in this temple of military excellence. The walls were lined with photographs of previous course graduates, men and women in crisp uniforms holding certificates, shaking hands with generals, standing beside rifles that cost more than most people's cars. The reception area buzzed with quiet, confident conversation. Groups of 2 and 3 clustered around high-top tables, their gear arranged with military precision, their clothing a mixture of tactical brands that Isabella recognized from magazines but could never afford. Under Armour, 5.11 Tactical, Cry precision names that whispered of serious money and serious commitment to the craft of precision shooting. Isabella approached the reception desk where a woman in military uniform sat behind a computer terminal. The nameplate read Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Wong, and her expression suggested she'd seen every type of student walk through these doors and could categorize them within seconds. "I'm here for the Advanced Precision Marksmanship course," Isabella said, setting down her rifle case and digging through her bag for the paperwork. Isabella Morales. Gunnery Sergeant Wong's eyes swept over Isabella's appearance with the efficiency of a seasoned NCO conducting an inspection. The pause was barely perceptible, but Isabella caught it, that moment of assessment where she was measured and found wanting. "Course starts at 0800, Wong said, fingers clicking across the keyboard. "You'll need to check in your weapon at the armory for inspection, complete the liability waivers, and attend the safety briefing in Conference Room Bravo." She slid a packet of papers across the desk. "Equipment inspection is at 0900. Make sure everything meets course standards." Isabella nodded, accepting the papers, but before she could respond, a voice behind her cut through the ambient noise. "Well, look what we have here." She turned to see a man approaching, and everything about him screamed professional operator. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of being the best at what you do. His tactical shirt was perfectly fitted, his gear bag bore the logos of multiple sponsors, and his handshake with another participant suggested he was already well known in these circles. "Garrett Jackson," he said, extending a hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Most people call me Viper. You new to this kind of training?" "Isabella Morales," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "And yes, first time here." Viper's gaze swept over her equipment with the same assessment she'd received from the desk sergeant, but his evaluation was far less subtle. His eyes lingered on her duct-taped rifle case, her worn bag, her off-the-shelf clothing. "Interesting gear choices," he said, the comment walking the line between observation and insult. "You come from a law enforcement background?" "Army," Isabella replied simply. "Army, huh?" Viper nodded slowly. "Well, this course is a little different from basic marksmanship training. We're talking precision shooting at extended ranges, advanced ballistics calculations, environmental factors most people never consider. It's not really designed for—" He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. Hobbyists. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Isabella felt her jaw tighten, but she forced her expression to remain neutral. She'd dealt with condescension before in the Army, in job interviews, in the civilian world where her military experience was either fetishized or dismissed. "I'm sure I'll manage," she said quietly. Before Viper could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "Garrett, stop terrorizing the new students before class even starts." The speaker was a woman, mid-30s, with the kind of athletic build that suggested serious dedication to physical fitness. Her gear was as high-end as Viper's, but she wore it with less obvious display. Her handshake was firm, professional. "Amanda Walsh," she said. "Ignore Garrett, he thinks intimidation is a teaching tool." "Just setting realistic expectations," Viper replied with a shrug. "This isn't a course where you can fake your way through. Either you have the skills and equipment to compete at this level, or you wash out. Simple as that." Amanda rolled her eyes. "What Garrett is trying to say, in his own charming way, is that this course has a high attrition rate. About 40% of students don't complete it. But that's what makes it valuable. The standards are legitimate." Isabella nodded, appreciating Amanda's more straightforward approach. "What's your background?" "Force Recon, now work as a contractor for various agencies. This is my third time through the course. I come back whenever they update the curriculum." Amanda glanced at Isabella's gear without the judgment that had marked Viper's assessment. "What about you?" "Military police. 2 deployments in Afghanistan. Been shooting competitively since I got out. Local matches?" Viper asked, and something in his tone suggested that local matches were somehow beneath serious consideration. "Mostly," Isabella admitted. Viper exchanged a look with Amanda that Isabella pretended not to notice. It was the kind of look that said they'd seen this before, the wannabe who thought civilian shooting experience would translate to military-level precision training. "Well," Amanda said diplomatically, "everyone starts somewhere. The instructors here are top-notch. You'll learn a lot, regardless of where you end up on the final rankings." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another participant, someone who clearly knew both Viper and Amanda. The three of them fell into easy banter about previous courses, mutual acquaintances, and upcoming competitions. Isabella found herself relegated to the role of observer, listening to references she didn't understand about people she'd never met competing in matches she'd never heard of. The feeling of being an outsider intensified as more participants arrived. They moved with the easy confidence of people who belonged, greeting each other with the casual familiarity of a community she wasn't part of. Their gear told stories of serious investment in their craft custom rifles, precision optics, accessories that cost more than Isabella's monthly rent, She excused herself from the group and found a quiet corner where she could complete her paperwork without feeling like she was being constantly evaluated. The liability waivers were extensive, covering everything from equipment failure to personal injury. Written in the kind of legal language that suggested this course pushed people beyond their comfort zones on a regular basis. As she filled out forms, she caught fragments of conversation from nearby groups. Discussion of ballistic coefficients, wind reading techniques, ammunition lots, and equipment modifications that might as well have been spoken in a foreign language. These people weren't just skilled shooters, they were gear nerds, data analysts and equipment specialists who approached marksmanship with the kind of technical precision usually reserved for rocket science. For the first time since deciding to attend the course, Isabella wondered if she'd made a mistake. Not just a financial mistake, though the money she'd spent represented months of sacrifice, but a fundamental miscalculation about her place in this world. Maybe Viper was right. Maybe this wasn't designed for people like her. But as she signed the final waiver and prepared to head to the equipment inspection, she remembered something her grandfather had told her before he died. He'd been a Marine in Vietnam, a quiet man who rarely talked about his service but had taught her to shoot with the same patience he'd once used to teach recruits. "Izzy," he'd said, "the thing about proving yourself is that you can't do it with words. You can only do it with actions. And actions speak loudest when nobody expects to hear anything at all." She folded the paperwork, picked up her gear, and headed toward the armory. Time to find out what her actions would say. The armory was a temple to precision weaponry. Glass cases lined the walls, displaying rifles that represented the absolute pinnacle of marksmanship technology. Custom bolt actions with price tags that could fund a small car. Precision AR platforms that belonged in museums, and optics that cost more than Isabella's annual salary. Each weapon was a work of art, meticulously crafted by master gunsmiths whose waiting lists stretched for years. Staff Sergeant Murphy, the range safety officer, presided over the equipment inspection with the methodical thoroughness of a man who'd seen every possible way for things to go wrong. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he examined each participant's gear, checking serial numbers against registration forms, testing scope mounts, and verifying that ammunition met course specifications. Isabella watched from the back of the line as other participants presented their equipment for inspection. Each rifle that came out of its case seemed more impressive than the last. She saw carbon fiber stocks, titanium actions, barrels that had been hand-lapped to tolerances measured in fractions of thousands of inches. The participants discussed their equipment with the casual expertise of people who spoke fluent ballistics, talking about twist rates, chamber dimensions, and load development like other people discussed the weather. "Holy shit, is that the new Barrett, MRID?" Someone whispered as a participant ahead of Isabella opened his case. The rifle that emerged was a work of mechanical art, matte black finish, precision machined components, and an optical sight that probably cost more than Isabella's car. The owner, a man in his 40s wearing tactical pants and a shirt embroidered with the logo of a high-end shooting school, handled it with the reverence of someone presenting a religious artifact. "Just got it back from the custom shop," he said with barely contained pride. Had the trigger worked down to 12 ounces, barrel hand-lapped, and the action blueprinted. Should be shooting half-MOA groups out to 1,000 yards. Staff Sergeant Murphy examined the rifle with professional appreciation, checking the bolt operation, verifying the scope mounting, and running his fingers along the barrel's crown. "Beautiful work," he admitted. "Who did the custom shop work?" The conversation that followed involved names Isabella didn't recognize, discussing gunsmiths and precision manufacturers that operated in a world completely separate from the basic military surplus equipment she'd grown up with. These weren't just firearms, they were precision instruments, crafted by master artisans for people who could afford perfection. As the line moved forward, Isabella became increasingly aware of the whispered conversations happening around her. Other participants had noticed her equipment, and their comments weren't particularly subtle. Is that duct tape on her case? Look at that scope, I think. My grandfather had one like that in Korea. How did she even get accepted into this course? The comments stung, but Isabella had developed thick skin during her military service. She'd been underestimated before because of her size, her gender, her background, her accent. She'd learned to let the whispers fuel her determination rather than undermine her confidence. When her turn finally came, Staff Sergeant Murphy's expression was carefully neutral as she opened her rifle case. The weapon inside looked exactly like what it was, a basic military pattern rifle that had seen honest use. The stock showed wear marks, the metal bore the patina of age, and the scope was functional but clearly budget grade. Standard M24 pattern, Murphy observed, lifting the rifle to examine it more closely. Remington 700 action? Yes, sir, Isabella replied. I bought it from a retiring Marine about 3 years ago. Murphy worked the bolt, checking the action smoothness, then examined the scope mounting. His inspection was thorough but professional, without the subtle disdain she'd expected. Trigger work? No, sir. Factory trigger. Barrel modifications? No, sir. Everything's stock except for the scope mounts. Murphy nodded, making notes on his clipboard. Ammunition? Isabella handed over a box of match-grade 308 ammunition, the best she could afford, but clearly budget tier compared to the custom handloads other participants were using. Federal gold medal match, Murphy read from the box. Good choice for factory ammo. Rifles in good condition. Scope mounts are solid. Everything meets course safety requirements. He handed the rifle back to her. You're cleared for training. The relief in Isabella's voice was audible. Thank you, sir. As she moved away from the inspection station, she caught fragments of conversation from the group that had been watching her inspection. At least it's not some pawn shop special. Still, that scope is probably worth more as a paperweight than a precision instrument. I give her 2 days before she realizes she's in over her head. The speaker was Garrett Viper Jackson, and his assessment carried the authority of someone who'd clearly established himself as an alpha in this environment. Isabella noticed that other participants deferred to his opinions, laughed at his jokes, and seemed to orbit around his presence like planets around a sun. Cut her some slack, Garrett, Amanda Walsh said, but her tone suggested she was going through the motions rather than mounting a serious defense. We all started somewhere. Sure, Viper replied, but most of us started somewhere that prepared us for this level of training. This isn't a beginner's course. The standards here aren't negotiable. Isabella focused on repacking her rifle, trying to ignore the conversation that was clearly about her, even though they were speaking as if she wasn't there. She'd dealt with alpha personalities before, both in the military and in the civilian shooting community. The trick was to avoid getting drawn into their games while proving herself through performance rather than words. Besides, Viper continued, the course fee alone should filter out people who aren't serious. If you can't afford proper equipment, maybe you should stick to local club matches until you can. The comment hit its mark. Isabella's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain silent. Engaging with Viper would only give him more ammunition, and she'd learned that the best response to condescension was competence. Equipment doesn't make the shooter, said a new voice. Isabella looked up to see an older man, probably in his 50s, with the kind of weathered face that suggested decades of military service. His own rifle case was high-end but not flashy, and his gear showed the kind of professional selection that came from experience rather than catalogs. Master Chief Ramirez, he introduced himself to Isabella. I'll be one of your instructors this week. Isabella Morales, Master Chief. Pleasure to meet you. Ramirez nodded approvingly. Army? Yes, sir. Military police, 2 deployments. Good. You'll find this course challenging, But if you're here, it means we think you can handle it." He glanced at her rifle case. "I've seen $1,000,000 rifles shoot 2-inch groups, and I've seen beat-up old war horses shoot bug holes. It's not about the equipment, it's about the fundamentals." The comment was clearly directed at Viper, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Ramirez carried the kind of authority that came from decades of proven competence, and even someone as confident as Viper wasn't going to argue with him directly. "Of course, Master Chief," Viper said diplomatically. "I just want everyone to succeed." Ramirez's smile suggested he'd heard that particular line before. "I'm sure you do. Now, if everyone's finished with the equipment pissing contest, we have a safety briefing to attend." As the group began moving toward the conference room, Isabella felt a small spark of hope. Maybe not everyone here was ready to write her off before she'd even fired a shot. Maybe competence really did matter more than gear. She was about to find out. Conference room Bravo was sterile and efficient, filled with the kind of metal folding chairs that suggested function over comfort. Isabella took a seat toward the back, hoping to blend into the background while Master Chief Ramirez conducted the safety briefing. The presentation covered range procedures, emergency protocols, and course expectations with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen enough accidents to take nothing for granted. "This is not a basic marksmanship course," Ramirez emphasized, clicking through slides that showed the various training stages. "We'll be shooting at distances from 300 to 1,200 yards, in various weather conditions, with time constraints and stress factors designed to replicate real-world scenarios. The washout rate is typically around 40%, not because we enjoy failing people, but because the standards are non-negotiable." Isabella studied the course outline with growing apprehension. Long-range ballistics calculations, wind reading, range estimation without electronic aids, precision shooting under time pressure, and unknown distance challenges. Each module built on the previous one, creating a progression that would separate the truly skilled from those who'd simply gotten lucky in local competitions. "Your first practical exercise begins in 30 minutes, Ramirez continued. "We'll start with a basic competency assessment at 300 yards. 5 shots, no time limit, but you'll need to achieve a minimum group size to continue in the course. This isn't about perfection, it's about demonstrating that you have the fundamental skills to benefit from advanced instruction." As the briefing concluded, participants began filing out toward the ranges. Isabella hung back, hoping to avoid another confrontation with Viper and his growing circle of admirers. But as she reached the door, she found her path blocked by 2 men she hadn't met yet. "You're the Army girl, right?" The speaker was tall and lean, with the kind of confidence that came from years of military service. His nameplate read Brandon Kelly, and his handshake was firm but perfunctory. "Isabella Morales," she replied, "and yes, Army. Ryan Foster." The second man introduced himself. He was shorter but more heavily built, with forearms that suggested serious time in the gym. "We were just wondering what made you decide to take this course." The question seemed innocent enough, but something in their tone suggested it wasn't casual curiosity. Isabella had developed radar for this kind of interaction during her military service, the probing questions that were really assessments, designed to determine whether she belonged or was just taking up space that could go to someone more deserving. "Same reason as everyone else, I assume," she replied carefully. "To improve my skills." Kelly and Foster exchanged a look that she pretended not to notice. "It's just that this course is pretty expensive," Foster said. "Most people who attend are either active duty with military funding, contractors making good money, or serious competitors with sponsor support. It's unusual to see someone." He paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. Double quotes ... investing their own money without a clear career path that would benefit from the training. The implication was clear. What was a retail worker doing in a course designed for professionals? Isabella felt her temper starting to rise, but forced her voice to remain level. "I guess I just believe in challenging myself," she said. "Admirable," Kelly replied, but his tone suggested he found it more foolish than admirable. "Well, good luck with the assessment. The 300-yard qualification can be tricky if you're not used to precision shooting." As they walked away, Isabella heard Foster's stage whisper, "$5 says she doesn't make it past the first day." The comment followed her out to the range, where participants were already setting up for the qualification shoot. The facility was impressive: multiple covered firing positions with concrete benches, electronic target systems, and wind flags positioned at regular intervals to help shooters read environmental conditions. Isabella found an open position and began unpacking her gear, acutely aware that other participants were watching her setup with barely concealed curiosity. Her sandbag rest looked primitive compared to the adjustable bipods and precision rests that others were using. Her scope, while functional, lacked the clarity and magnification of the high-end optics that surrounded her. "First time shooting at 300 yards?" asked the shooter in the next position, a woman in her 40s whose gear suggested serious money and serious commitment to the sport. "No," Isabella replied, adjusting her rifle position, "but first time on this range." The woman nodded sympathetically. "These electronic targets can be tricky. The lighting conditions are different from what you might be used to outdoors." It was a kindly meant comment, but it carried the assumption that Isabella's experience was limited to basic outdoor ranges. She didn't bother correcting the misconception, let them underestimate her. It had worked to her advantage before. Master Chief Ramirez's voice carried across the range through the PA system. "Shooters, you have unlimited time for this assessment, but remember that this is about demonstrating fundamental competency. We're looking for a 5-shot group that measures 3 inches or less. Miss that standard, and we'll have a conversation about whether this course is appropriate for your current skill level. 3 inches at 300 yards. For skilled shooters with proper equipment, it should be easily achievable. For someone with basic gear and limited experience at that distance, it represented a real challenge." Isabella loaded her first cartridge, working the bolt slowly and deliberately. Through her scope, the target looked impossibly small, a black circle that seemed to dance slightly in the heat mirage rising from the concrete. She took a deep breath, settling into the shooting position she'd practiced thousands of times on. Shorter ranges, the fundamentals were the same regardless of distance: stable position, consistent sight picture, smooth trigger pull, proper follow-through. She'd learned these principles in basic training, refined them through years of practice, and relied on them during qualification shoots that meant the difference between promotion and stagnation. But as she prepared to fire her first shot, she became acutely aware of the whispered conversations happening around her. "Look at that shooting position. She's got the stock too high on her shoulder. That scope's probably got more windage drift than a weather vane. I've seen steadier holds from people with Parkinson's." The comments were meant to be heard, designed to get into her head and disrupt her concentration. It was a psychological game she'd encountered before, particularly from male soldiers who resented sharing space with women in traditionally male roles. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, blocking out the noise and focusing on her grandfather's voice. "Shooting is about finding stillness in the chaos, Mia. The rifle knows what to do, you just have to get out of its way." She opened her eyes, settled the crosshairs on the center of the target, and began her breathing cycle. Inhale. Exhale, halfway hold. The crosshairs steadied. Her finger found the trigger, taking up the slack until she felt the crisp break point. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the sound echoing across the range. Through her scope, she could see a small black hole appear in the target dot center, but well within the scoring rings. "Not bad for an amateur," someone commented behind her. The praise backhanded, but still acknowledgement that she'd hit the target. 4 more shots to go. each one an opportunity to prove that she belonged here, or to confirm everyone's suspicions that she was out of her depth. Isabella worked the bolt, chambered the second round, and settled back into position. The whispers continued around her, but they seemed fainter now, pushed into the background by her growing focus. Time to find out if her grandfather's lessons could stand up to the scrutiny of the military's elite marksmen. Isabella's second shot landed slightly left of her first, still well within the scoring area, but not the tight group she was hoping for. She could feel the weight of observation from other shooters who had paused their own preparations to watch. The unknown quantity with the budget equipment. "Breathing's off," someone muttered behind her. "She's rushing the shots." The criticism stung because it was partially accurate. Isabella could feel her heart rate elevated, her breathing slightly irregular from the pressure of being watched and judged. She forced herself to slow down, to treat this like any other range session rather than a performance under scrutiny. Her third shot was better closer to the center, part of what was beginning to look like a respectable group. The fourth shot opened the group slightly, and by the time she fired her fifth and final round, she had created a cluster that measured just under 2.5 inches. Well within the qualification standard, but nothing that would impress anyone. 2.4 inches, Master Chief Ramirez announced as he reviewed her target through the electronic scoring system. "Well done, that's solid fundamental shooting." The praise was genuine but measured acknowledgement of competence without suggestion of excellence. Around the range, other participants were posting similar results, with a few standout performances that drew murmurs of approval. Viper Jackson, shooting 2 positions down from Isabella, had just completed his string with a group that measured barely over an inch. The electronic display showed 5 shots clustered tightly around the center of the target, the kind of precision that spoke to years of serious training and premium equipment. "Now that's how it's done," Foster commented loudly enough for the entire firing line to hear. "When you have the right gear and the right training, the results speak for themselves." Amanda Walsh matched Viper's performance with her own sub-inch group, using a rifle that probably cost more than Isabella's annual rent. The easy confidence with which both elite shooters approached the challenge made it clear that the 300-yard qualification was merely a warm-up for them, not a legitimate test of their abilities. As the qualification session concluded, Master Chief Ramirez gathered the participants around a large whiteboard where he began outlining the week's progression. The basic competency assessment was just the beginning, a way to ensure that everyone could at least hit targets at intermediate ranges before moving on to the real challenges. "Tomorrow we begin the advanced modules," Ramirez explained, drawing a timeline on the board. "Day 2 is unknown distance challenges. You'll engage targets at ranges from 400 to 800 yards without electronic aids. Day 3 introduces environmental factors, wind reading, temperature variations, and atmospheric pressure changes. Day 4 is precision shooting under stress, time constraints, physical challenges, and psychological pressure." Isabella felt her stomach tighten as she listened to the progression. Each day would build on the previous one, adding layers of complexity that would separate the truly skilled from those who'd simply gotten lucky in controlled conditions. Day 5, Ramirez continued, culminates in the Master Challenge, a single shot at 1,000 yards under field conditions. This is where we separate the precision marksmen from the precision shooters. It's also where most people discover the limits of their equipment and training. A hand went up from the back of the group. "What's the pass rate for the Master Challenge?" Ramirez smiled grimly. "Historically? About 15%. Most participants can complete the course requirements through day 4, but the 1,000-yard shot requires a level of skill and equipment precision that eliminates most shooters. It's not about failure, it's about honest assessment of capabilities." Isabella felt a chill of realization. The course wasn't just about learning advanced techniques, it was designed as a filtering mechanism, identifying the small percentage of shooters who possessed both the skill and equipment necessary for true long-range precision work. The good news, Ramirez continued, is that completing any 4 of the 5 challenge days qualifies you for course completion. The Master Challenge is optional, a chance to test your absolute limits, but not a requirement for certification. Viper Jackson raised his hand. What about course records? Are there standings we should know about? Interesting you should ask, Ramirez replied, walking to another whiteboard that had been covered by a tarp. He pulled it away to reveal a list of names and scores, the Hall of Fame for course graduates who had achieved exceptional performance. The list was short, maybe 20 names spanning several years. Each entry included the shooter's name, military affiliation, and their best performance on the Master Challenge. The top score belonged to someone named SGT Martinez, USMC 1,000 yards, 0.8 MOA, 2019. These represent the absolute best performances we've seen, Ramirez explained. Sub-EMOA accuracy at 1,000 yards under field conditions. It's the kind of shooting that separates legends from very good marksmen. Isabella studied the board with fascination and growing trepidation. The names represented the elite of the elite shooters whose precision at extreme distances bordered on the supernatural. The idea that she might even attempt to join that list seemed almost laughably ambitious. Now, Ramirez said, his tone shifting to something more serious, I need to address something before we continue. This course has a reputation for being competitive. Some of you are here to set records, some to prove points, and some to advance careers. That's all fine, but remember that this is ultimately about pushing individual limits, not about beating other people. His gaze swept across the group, lingering on Viper and his circle of admirers. The mountain doesn't care about your ego, your equipment, or your reputation. Long-range precision shooting is about honest communication between you, your rifle, and the laws of physics. Everything else is just noise. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Isabella could feel the tension between the competitive personalities, who clearly saw this course as a proving ground for their elite status, and the instructors who seemed more interested in legitimate skill development. Questions? Ramirez asked. Viper raised his hand again. Are there any prerequisites for attempting the Master Challenge? Equipment standards or previous performance requirements? The question was clearly motivated by his assessment of Isabella and anyone else he considered unworthy of attempting the ultimate test. Ramirez seemed to recognize the underlying intent. The only prerequisite for the Master Challenge is completing the first 4 days of training, he replied firmly. After that, anyone who wants to test themselves at 1,000 yards is welcome to try. The target doesn't care what your rifle cost or where you trained before you got here. Isabella felt a spark of determination ignite in her chest. Maybe she wouldn't be able to compete with the custom rifles and premium equipment, but she'd earned the right to be here through the same qualification process as everyone else. If the course was designed to test limits, she was ready to discover what her limits actually were. As the group began to disperse, Amanda Walsh approached Isabella with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than the condescending interest she'd received from others. How are you feeling about the progression? Amanda asked. It's a pretty aggressive schedule. Nervous, Isabella admitted honestly. But that's probably appropriate. Amanda nodded approvingly. Good answer. Anyone who isn't nervous about shooting 1,000 yards either doesn't understand the challenge or is lying to themselves. She paused, studying Isabella's expression. You planning to attempt the Master Challenge? Isabella looked back at the record board, considering the question seriously. 4 days ago, the idea would have seemed impossible. Now, having survived the first day and met the qualification standard, it felt less like fantasy and more like a goal worth pursuing. I guess we'll see how the week goes, she replied. Amanda smiled, the first genuinely encouraging expression. Isabella had received from any of the elite shooters. Fair enough. But if you do decide to try it, remember that the shot itself is just the final step. The real challenge is everything that leads up to it. As Isabella packed up her gear and prepared to leave for the day, she found herself studying that record board one more time. 20 names representing years of exceptional performance. 20 shooters who had achieved something most marksmen could only dream about. For the first time since arriving at the facility, Isabella allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to add her name to that list. The second day dawned gray and overcast, with a persistent wind that had the range flags snapping at irregular intervals. Isabella arrived early, hoping to claim some quiet time to familiarize herself with the unknown distance range before the other participants arrived. The 400 to 800-yard course stretched across a valley that had been specifically designed to challenge even experienced marksmen. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Unlike the controlled environment of the 300-yard range, this course presented targets at various distances without electronic aids or distance markers. Shooters would need to estimate range using only their optics and environmental clues, then make the appropriate ballistic calculations to achieve hits on targets that seemed impossibly small through standard rifle scopes. Isabella set up her equipment at firing position 7, trying to ignore the superior gear being arranged at neighboring positions. Viper Jackson had claimed position 3, and his setup looked like something from a military catalog spread. Custom rifle with a high-end variable scope, precision ammunition sorted by lot number, ballistic calculator, wind meter, and a shooting mat that probably cost more than Isabella's monthly grocery budget. "Early bird today," commented a voice behind her. Isabella turned to see Master Chief Ramirez, approaching with a cup of coffee and the relaxed demeanor of someone who'd supervised thousands of nervous shooters over the years. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Figured I'd try to get a feel for the range before things got competitive." Ramirez nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. This course reveals a lot about how people handle uncertainty. Some shooters freeze up when they can't rely on known distances and perfect conditions." He gestured toward the valley where targets were positioned at what appeared to be random locations. "What do you see out there?" Isabella studied the terrain through her scope, noting the subtle differences in vegetation, shadows, and perspective that might provide clues about distance. Targets at T may be 450, 600, and 750 yards. "Hard to tell without reference points," Close, Ramirez said. "But you're thinking like someone who's used to flat ranges with marked distances. Real-world shooting rarely gives you that luxury." As other participants began arriving, the atmosphere grew noticeably tense. Today's challenge would separate those with genuine field experience from range queens who excelled only under controlled conditions. Isabella noticed that several shooters were making elaborate preparations, consulting ballistic tables, taking environmental readings, and discussing complex mathematical calculations that seemed to require advanced degrees in physics. Viper Jackson was holding court near his position, explaining wind reading techniques to a small group of admirers. His presentation was impressive, filled with technical terminology and references to advanced training courses that cost more than most people's annual salaries. "The key to unknown distance shooting," Viper explained, "is having the right equipment and the experience to use it properly. You need a rifle that's been precisely zeroed at multiple distances, ballistic software that accounts for atmospheric variables, and optics that allow accurate range estimation." His gaze swept across the firing line, pausing meaningfully on Isabella's modest setup. "Some people think they can rely on luck or basic military training, but this level of precision shooting requires serious investment in both gear and education." The comment was clearly directed at her, designed to reinforce the message that she was out of her depth. Isabella focused on her rifle preparation, checking her zero and confirming that her basic ballistic chart was properly laminated against the morning moisture. "Don't let him get in your head," Amanda Walsh said quietly, setting up at the position next to Isabella. "Viper's good, but he's also insecure enough that he needs to tear down others to feel superior." Isabella glanced at Amanda's rifle high-end equipment, but not the ostentatious display that characterized Viper's setup. "You think I have a chance today?" "I think you wouldn't be here if you didn't have a chance," Amanda replied diplomatically. "The question is whether you can trust your fundamentals when the variables start stacking up." Before Isabella could respond, Master Chief Ramirez's voice carried across the range through the PA system. "Shooters, today's challenge consists of 3 unknown distance targets. You'll have 1 shot at each target, with 5 minutes between shooting positions to make range estimations and ballistic calculations. No electronic rangefinders, no spotting scopes, no assistance from other shooters." The rules were simple but unforgiving. Miss a target and you'd eliminated yourself from contention for top scorers. Hit all 3 and you'd proven that your skills translated to field conditions. "Target 1 is now active," Ramirez announced. "Begin your range estimation phase." Isabella raised her rifle and began studying the first target through her scope. It appeared to be a standard silhouette, but estimating its distance required careful analysis of how it related to surrounding terrain features. She'd learned basic range estimation techniques in the Army, but nothing as sophisticated as what some other shooters were employing. Around her, she could hear whispered conversations as shooting teams discussed ballistic solutions and environmental factors. Some participants were using smartphone apps to calculate precise firing solutions, while others consulted printed ballistic tables that looked like engineering references. Isabella relied on the simpler method her grandfather had taught her, using the mil-reticle in her scope to estimate target size and distance, then applying basic ballistic principles she'd memorized through repetition rather than calculation. "Time," Ramirez called out. "Shooters may now engage target 1. The firing line erupted in a sequence of rifle reports as participants took their shots. Isabella waited for a brief lull in the wind, settled her crosshairs on the center of the distant silhouette, and squeezed the trigger. Through her scope, she saw the target indicators flash but couldn't tell if she'd achieved a hit. The electronic scoring system would provide feedback after all shooters had engaged, adding another layer of uncertainty to an already stressful situation. "Target 2 is now active," came the announcement. "Begin range estimation." The second target appeared to be at a significantly different distance, requiring a completely new ballistic calculation. Isabella's basic system forced her to rely more on instinct and experience than mathematical precision, but it also prevented her from overthinking the shot. As she prepared for her second engagement, she became aware that other shooters were watching her with increasing curiosity. Her first shot had been fired quickly and confidently, without the elaborate preparation that characterized most other participants. Either she was foolishly overconfident, or she possessed a level of intuitive shooting skill that didn't require extensive calculation. "Interesting technique," commented Brandon Kelly from 2 positions down. "Most people need more time for ballistic solutions at these distances." Isabella didn't respond, focusing instead on her sight picture and breathing rhythm. The target looked smaller than the first one, suggesting either greater distance or different target dimensions. She made a mental adjustment for bullet drop and windage, then waited for her shooting opportunity. The second shot felt good as it broke, with minimal disturbance to her sight picture and good follow-through. Again, she couldn't immediately confirm the hit, but her instinct suggested she'd been close to center. "Target 3 is now active. This is your final engagement." The third target was clearly the most challenging, smaller, more distant, and positioned in a location where environmental factors would have maximum impact on bullet trajectory. Isabella could see other shooters making extensive calculations, consulting multiple references, and taking environmental readings with expensive instruments. She took a different approach, relying on the accumulated wisdom of thousands of practice shots and the fundamentals that had been drilled into her through years of consistent training. The mathematics were important, but at some point, shooting became an art that transcended calculation. Her final shot surprised her with its clean break and minimal recoil disturbance. Whatever happened with the scoring, she'd given her best effort using the skills and equipment available to her. All shooters have engaged, Ramirez announced. Stand by for scoring results. The tension on the firing line was palpable as everyone waited to learn whether their shots had found their marks. Isabella felt her heart pounding as she realized that the next few minutes would determine whether she advanced in the course or became another casualty of unrealistic ambition. The electronic scoring system began displaying results, and the range fell silent as everyone waited to see who had survived the unknown distance challenge. Target 1 results, Master Chief Ramirez announced, reading from his tablet as the electronic display updated. 12 hits out of 15 shooters, good performance overall. Isabella felt a wave of relief as her name appeared in the hit column, though she noticed that 3 participants, including one of Viper's admirers, had missed completely and would likely struggle to advance in the course rankings. Target 2 results, Ramirez continued. 8 hits out of 15 shooters. Target distance was 687 yards longer than most people estimated. Again, Isabella's name appeared among the hits, though the group was shrinking. The unknown distance challenge was doing exactly what it was designed to do, separating shooters who could adapt to field conditions from those who relied too heavily on controlled environments. Target 3 results, Ramirez paused, studying his tablet with what looked like surprise. 5 hits out of 15 shooters. Target distance was 823 yards, with a 12-mile-per-hour crosswind. Isabella held her breath as the names appeared on the display. Viper Jackson hit. Amanda Walsh hit. Ryan Foster hit. Isabella Morales hit, but it was the final name. That caused a stir among the assembled shooters. Master Chief Ramirez himself had apparently taken the challenge alongside the students, and his name appeared with a notation that read, Course record, 823 yards, 0.3 MOA. Impressive shooting overall, Ramirez said, his tone carefully neutral. But I want to draw your attention to something unusual. He manipulated his tablet, and the large display screen showed detailed shot analysis for each successful engagement. Most hits were clustered in the outer rings of the targets, solid hits that demonstrated competence but not exceptional precision. Target 3 analysis shows some interesting results, Ramirez continued. While most successful shots landed in the 7 to 9 ring, we had 2 exceptional performances. The display zoomed in on Target 3, showing the impact points of all 5 successful hits. 4 shots were scattered around the target in what would normally be considered excellent shooting for such challenging conditions. But 2 shots stood out dramatically, both nearly centered, both representing precision that bordered on the impossible. Shot analysis indicates that 2 shooters achieved sub-MOA accuracy on an 823-yard target under field conditions, Ramirez announced. For those keeping score, that's precision typically seen only in controlled laboratory environments. The range fell completely silent. Sub-MOA accuracy at over 800 yards meant that the bullet had struck within roughly an 8-inch circle, the kind of precision that professional snipers trained years to achieve. The first exceptional shot, Ramirez continued, measured 0.3 MOA and was fired by Master Chief Ramirez using a custom precision rifle and match-grade hand-loaded ammunition. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the group. Ramirez's reputation for exceptional marksmanship was well established, and his equipment represented the absolute pinnacle of precision shooting technology. The second exceptional shot, Ramirez paused, double-checking his tablet as if he couldn't quite believe the data. Measured 0.2 melee and was fired by Isabella. Morales using standard military pattern equipment and factory ammunition. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face as every person on the firing line turned to stare at her. The impossibility of what Ramirez had just announced was staggering. Not just that she'd achieved exceptional accuracy, but that she'd actually outshot the Master Chief using equipment that cost a fraction of what others were using. That can't be right, Viper Jackson said, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and indignation. The scoring system must have made an error. Ramirez's expression remained neutral, but Isabella caught a hint of amusement in his eyes. I thought the same thing, so I had the target analysis run 3 times. The measurements are confirmed. He manipulated the display to show a close-up photograph of target 3. 2 holes were visible near the exact center, one slightly larger, one smaller and positioned with surgical precision just touching the center ring. The smaller hole, Ramirez explained, represents a 168-grain federal gold medal match bullet fired from approximately 823 yards. Based on trajectory analysis and environmental factors, this shot represents precision shooting at a level that, well, let's just say it's exceptional. Isabella found herself unable to speak. The shot had felt good when she fired it, but she'd had no way of knowing the actual result until this moment. The idea that she'd not only hit the target but achieved record-level precision seemed too improbable to accept. How is that even possible? Amanda Walsh asked, her tone suggesting genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. I mean, no disrespect, but that level of precision usually requires equipment and training that ... She trailed off, apparently realizing that finishing the sentence would be insulting. But the unspoken question hung in the air. How could someone with basic equipment and no elite training background achieve results that exceeded what most professionals could accomplish? That's an excellent question, Ramirez replied. And it illustrates something important about precision shooting that equipment manufacturers don't like to advertise. He walked over to Isabella's position and picked up her rifle, examining it with the same thoroughness he'd shown during the initial equipment inspection. This rifle, he announced to the group, represents exactly what precision shooting is supposed to be about. It's properly zeroed, meticulously maintained, and fired by someone who understands fundamentals at an instinctive level. He worked the bolt action, noting its smoothness despite the rifle's obvious age. The shooter has clearly spent thousands of rounds learning this particular weapon's characteristics. She knows exactly how it behaves in different conditions, trusts its capabilities completely, and doesn't second-guess herself with overthinking. Isabella finally found her voice. Master Chief, I'm not sure how that happened. I just aimed for center and tried to make a good shot. Exactly, Ramirez replied, setting the rifle back down. You didn't overcomplicate it with calculations and technology. You relied on fundamentals, experience, and instinct. Sometimes that produces results that all the gear in the world can't match. The implications of what had just happened began to sink in among the other participants. Isabella hadn't just succeeded despite her modest equipment. She achieved a level of performance that challenged every assumption about what was required for elite-level precision shooting. Viper Jackson's expression had shifted from skepticism to something approaching hostility. One shot doesn't prove anything, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Luck happens. Consistency is what separates real shooters from people who get lucky. His comment carried the implicit challenge that Isabella's performance was a fluke, that under continued pressure, her limitations would be exposed and the natural order would be restored. Master Chief Ramirez smiled at the challenge. Interesting point, which brings us to tomorrow's training evolution. He turned to address the entire group. but his gaze lingered on Isabella. Day 3 introduces environmental shooting, multiple targets under varying conditions, with environmental factors that will test every aspect of your training and equipment. The message was clear. Isabella's exceptional shot had earned her credibility, but it had also painted a target on her back. Tomorrow would determine whether she could maintain that level of performance under increased scrutiny and pressure. As the group began to disperse, Isabella found herself surrounded by participants who had previously ignored her existence. Some offered congratulations, others asked technical questions about her shooting technique, and a few seemed to be studying her equipment with new respect. But it was Master Chief Ramirez's quiet comment as he walked past that stayed with her. Outstanding shooting morales. But remember, the higher you climb, the farther you have to fall. Don't let success change your fundamentals. As Isabella packed up her gear, she could feel Viper Jackson's eyes on her from across the range. His expression suggested that he viewed her success as a personal challenge to his status as the course's elite performer. Tomorrow's training would be more than just advanced marksmanship instruction. It would be a test of whether Isabella could handle being in the spotlight while maintaining the quiet determination that had brought her this far. The record board with its list of exceptional performances suddenly seemed less like an impossible dream and more like a legitimate goal. But first, she'd have to prove that today's shot wasn't luck, it was skill that could be repeated when everything was on the line. That evening, Isabella sat in her modest motel room, staring at her phone screen in disbelief. Somehow, word of her record-breaking shot had already begun circulating within the military shooting community. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, and her email inbox contained messages from people claiming to represent equipment manufacturers, training schools, and even a military magazine wanting to interview her. The attention felt surreal. 24 hours ago, she'd been an unknown veteran struggling to prove she belonged in an elite training course. Now, apparently, people were calling her performance historic and game-changing. The disconnect between her modest circumstances and the growing buzz around her achievement seemed impossible to reconcile. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Amanda Walsh standing in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of genuine curiosity mixed with respect. "Mind if I come in?" Amanda asked. "I thought you might want to talk to someone who understands what happened today." Isabella stepped aside, grateful for the company. Her room was basic: a single bed, small table, and television that probably hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. Amanda didn't seem to notice the modest accommodations as she settled into the room's single chair. "How are you processing all this?" Amanda asked, offering one of the coffee cups. "Honestly, I'm not sure it really happened," Isabella replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I mean, I know it happened, but it doesn't feel real." Amanda nodded knowingly. "I had a similar experience about 5 years ago, not quite as dramatic as yours, but my first time shooting competitively at a major match. One good day can change everything, but it also creates expectations that are hard to live up to. That's what scares me," Isabella admitted. "What if it really was just luck? What if I can't do it again? Can I ask you something?" Amanda said, leaning forward. "When you fired that shot, what were you thinking about?" Isabella considered the question carefully. "Honestly, nothing complex. I was just trying to make the best shot I could with the equipment I had. Same fundamentals I've used thousands of times before." "That's your answer right there," Amanda replied. "Luck doesn't produce 0.2 AMO accuracy at 800 yards. That kind of precision comes from internalized fundamentals and thousands of hours of practice. The equipment helped, but equipment doesn't pull the trigger." Before Isabella could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number with a Virginia area code that she didn't recognize. "Isabella Morales?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. "This is Colonel Hayes from the Army Marksmanship Unit. I understand you've had quite a day at Camp Lejeune." Isabella's heart skipped. The Army Marksmanship Unit was the military's premier competitive shooting organization, the kind of elite program she'd dreamed about, but never imagined she'd have contact with. "Yes, sir," she managed to reply. "I've been following the reports from Master Chief Ramirez," Colonel Hayes continued. "Your performance today has generated considerable interest. We'd like to discuss some opportunities that might be available to someone with your demonstrated capabilities." The conversation that followed was brief but mind-bending. The Army Marksmanship Unit was interested in evaluating her for potential inclusion in their competitive shooting program. There were mentions of sponsorship opportunities, advanced training programs, and the possibility of representing the military in national and international competitions. When she hung up, Amanda was watching her with an amused expression. "Let me guess," Amanda said. "Someone wants to offer you opportunities you never thought possible." "The Army Marksmanship Unit," Isabella said, still processing the conversation. "They want to evaluate me for their competitive program." Amanda whistled appreciatively. "That's serious business. Those slots are incredibly competitive. Most people train for years just to get considered." "I don't understand how this is happening," Isabella said, sitting heavily on the bed. "Yesterday, I was a retail worker who saved up to take a shooting course. Today, people are talking about sponsorships and competitive programs." "Welcome to the world of precision shooting," Amanda replied. "It's a small community where exceptional performance gets noticed very quickly. Your shot today didn't just break a course record, it demonstrated a level of natural ability that can't be taught." A second knock at the door interrupted their conversation. This time it was Master Chief Ramirez, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Sorry to bother you," he said, "but we need to discuss tomorrow's training evolution." Isabella invited him in, noting that he seemed more serious than his usual relaxed demeanor. "I've been doing this for 23 years, Ramirez began, "and I've never seen anything quite like what happened today. Your shot has created ... complications." "What kind of complications?" Isabella asked. "The kind that happen when someone challenges established hierarchies," Ramirez replied diplomatically. "Some of the other participants are questioning whether the scoring system was accurate, whether your equipment was properly inspected, whether there might have been some kind of error or irregularity." Isabella felt her stomach drop. "Are you saying they think I cheated?" "I'm saying that exceptional performance sometimes makes people uncomfortable, especially when it comes from unexpected sources," Ramirez said carefully. "I've vouched for the accuracy of the scoring system and the integrity of your equipment, but tomorrow's training will be under increased scrutiny." Amanda frowned. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning that Isabella will be shooting under conditions designed to eliminate any possibility of error or controversy," Ramirez explained. "Multiple observers, video documentation, and challenges specifically designed to test whether today's performance can be replicated." The implication was clear. Isabella had earned respect with her record-breaking shot, but she'd also earned skepticism from those who couldn't accept that someone with her background and equipment could outperform elite shooters with superior resources. "I want to be clear about something," Ramirez continued, looking directly at Isabella. "What you accomplished today was legitimate, impressive, and earned through skill rather than luck. But tomorrow, you'll need to prove it again under conditions where every excuse has been eliminated." After Ramirez left, Isabella and Amanda sat in contemplative silence. The magnitude of what lay ahead was becoming clear. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about advancing through the course curriculum. It would be about proving that her success was sustainable and that she belonged among the elite performers who had initially dismissed her. "Any advice?" Isabella asked. Amanda smiled. "Same advice I'd give anyone facing a high-pressure situation. Trust your fundamentals. Ignore the noise and shoot your own match. You've already proven you can do this. Now you just need to prove you can do it when everyone's watching." As Amanda left, Isabella found herself alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that her life had changed in ways she was still struggling to understand. The modest rifle case leaning against the wall represented the same equipment she'd brought to the course, but somehow it felt different, now not like the desperate gamble of an unknown veteran, but like the tools of someone who might actually belong in the conversation about elite marksmanship. Her phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. This time, she let it go to voicemail. Whatever opportunities or challenges tomorrow brought, she needed to focus on the fundamentals that had brought her this far, the quiet determination that had sustained her through military service, civilian struggles, and the decision to attempt this course would have to be enough to carry her through whatever came next. But for the first time in years, Isabella Morales felt like she might be exactly where she was supposed to be. Day 3 arrived with the kind of weather that separated fair-weather shooters from those who understood that real-world precision meant performing under adverse conditions. A steady 15-mile-per-hour wind gusted across the range, carrying intermittent rain that would test both equipment and resolve. Isabella arrived to find the atmosphere dramatically changed from the previous 2 days. Where before she'd been largely ignored or dismissed, now she found herself the center of attention, in ways that felt both validating and uncomfortable. Several participants who had previously avoided her were suddenly interested in discussing shooting techniques, while others watched her equipment setup with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspected cheaters. The most obvious change was in the number of observers present. Master Chief Ramirez had mentioned increased scrutiny, but Isabella hadn't expected to see 3 additional instructors, a videographer, and what appeared to be a representative from the course certification board. Her every movement was being documented and analyzed in ways that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Quite the audience you've attracted," Viper Jackson commented as he sat up at the position next to hers. His tone was carefully neutral, but the underlying tension was unmistakable. "Not my choice," Isabella replied, focusing on her rifle preparation. She'd decided to treat today exactly like any other range session, same routine, same fundamentals, same quiet focus that had served her well throughout her shooting career. "Of course not," Viper said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious to see if yesterday's performance was sustainable. It's amazing how environmental factors can affect consistency." The comment was clearly designed to plant seeds of doubt, but Isabella had spent too many years dealing with psychological warfare in military environments to be easily rattled. She continued her preparation methodically, checking her rifles, zero, and confirming that her basic ballistic data remained accurate under the changed conditions. "Today's challenge," Master Chief Ramirez announced over the PA system, "will consist of 5 shooting positions at distances ranging from 400 to 1,000 yards. Each position presents different environmental challenges, and you'll have limited time to analyze conditions and engage targets." Isabella felt her stomach tighten. The 1,000-yard position represented the distance used for the Master Challenge, the ultimate test that historically only 15% of participants even attempted, let alone mastered. Position 1, 400 yards, standing unsupported, 2 minutes. To engage, the first challenge was designed to test fundamental shooting skills under time pressure. Isabella had fired thousands of rounds from standing positions during her military service, but the combination of distance, wind, and time constraints created a level of difficulty that eliminated many shooters immediately. She approached the firing line with the same deliberate calm she'd used for the record-breaking shot, ignoring the cameras and observers who documented her every movement. The fundamentals remained the same regardless of the audience. Stable shooting position, consistent sight picture, smooth trigger control. Her shot broke cleanly after 90 seconds of preparation, and the target indicators confirmed a solid hit in the 8 ring. Not perfect, but well within acceptable parameters for the challenging conditions. Position 2, 600 yards, prone supported, wind gusting to 20 miles per hour. The second position required reading environmental conditions that changed constantly. Isabella could see other shooters struggling with the variable wind. Their shots scattered across targets as they failed to adapt to the shifting conditions. She took a different approach, waiting for brief lulls in the wind rather than trying to calculate complex corrections for constantly changing conditions. Her shot landed in the 9 ring, demonstrating that patience and timing could overcome technological sophistication. Position 3, 750 yards, unknown wind conditions, 2 shots maximum. This challenge was specifically designed to test whether shooters could adapt quickly when environmental factors weren't clearly defined. Isabella could see wind flags at different distances showing conflicting information, creating a puzzle that required intuition as much as calculation. Her first shot landed in the 7 ring, good, but not exceptional. The miss taught her something about the wind patterns across the valley, and her second shot found the 9 ring with confidence that came from real-time learning rather than theoretical preparation. Position 4, 850 yards, adverse lighting conditions, single shot. The range staff had positioned lights to create challenging shadows and glare that interfered with target acquisition. Isabella could see other shooters struggling with the optical difficulties, their expensive scopes proving less effective than expected under the artificial lighting conditions. Her basic military scope, while lacking the advanced features of high-end optics, provided clear and consistent sight picture that wasn't affected by the lighting complications. Her shot landed in the 9 ring, maintaining the consistency that was becoming her trademark. Final position, 1,000 yards, master challenge conditions, single shot. Isabella approached the final firing position, knowing that this shot would define her place in the course hierarchy. The 1,000-yard target seemed impossibly small through her scope, a distant speck that required absolute precision in both ballistic calculation and shooting execution. The wind had picked up to nearly 25 miles per hour, with gusts that made the target flags dance erratically. Rain continued to fall intermittently, adding moisture that could affect both equipment and ammunition performance. Around her, she could sense the heightened attention of observers, cameras, and fellow participants. This was the moment that would determine whether her previous success represented sustainable skill or temporary luck. Isabella settled into her shooting position with the same methodical calm she'd used for thousands of practice sessions. She ignored the cameras, the whispered conversations, and the obvious expectation that she would finally fail under the ultimate pressure. Instead, she focused on the fundamentals that had carried her through military service, civilian struggles, and the journey that had brought her to this moment. Stable position, consistent breathing, smooth trigger control, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing she'd prepared as well as possible with the resources available to her. The crosshairs settled on the distant target, her breathing slowed to the rhythm she'd practiced thousands of times. The trigger reached its breakpoint with the same smooth surprise that had characterized every good shot she'd ever fired. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the muzzle blast echoing across the valley, and the bullet began its 1-second journey toward a target that would determine whether Isabella Morales had earned her place among the elite marksmen whose names graced the course record board. Through her scope, she could see the target indicators beginning to register the impact, but it would be several more seconds before the electronic scoring system would reveal whether she'd achieved the impossible again, or whether the skeptics had been right about her limitations. The silence on the firing line was absolute as everyone waited to learn whether yesterday's record-breaking performance had been the beginning of something extraordinary, or simply a beautiful moment that couldn't be sustained under real pressure. Isabella worked the bolt of her rifle, ejecting the spent brass that represented either triumph or failure. Either way, she'd given everything she had to the shot, trusting the fundamentals that had brought her this far. Now all she could do was wait for the target to tell her story. The electronic display flickered as the target analysis system processed the impact data. The silence on the firing line stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of wind through the range flags and the distant hum of the scoring computers. Then the display updated, and Master Chief Ramirez's voice carried across the range with barely controlled amazement. 1,000 yards. Center hit, 0.15 MOA. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. 0.15 AMOA at 1,000 yards meant Isabella's bullet had struck within approximately 1.5 inches of perfect center. Precision that defied every assumption about what was possible with basic equipment. Under adverse conditions, for a moment, nobody moved. The observers, cameras, and fellow participants seemed frozen in disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. Then Viper Jackson's voice cut through the silence, carrying a mixture of awe and defeat. "That's not possible," he said, but his tone had shifted from skepticism to wonder. "I mean, that's literally impossible with that equipment." Master Chief Ramirez approached the scoring station, double-checking the data with the same thoroughness he'd shown the previous day. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we have a new course record. 0.15 AMAO at 1,000 yards represents the most accurate shot in the 15-year history of this program." The implications hit Isabella like a physical blow. She hadn't just proven that her previous performance wasn't luck, she'd actually exceeded it under more challenging conditions, with an audience documenting every detail. The record board that had seemed like an impossible dream 3 days ago now had a new name at the top: Isabella Morales. Amanda Walsh was the first to break the stunned silence, walking over to Isabella with an expression of genuine respect and admiration. "I've been shooting competitively for 8 years, she said, extending her hand. "I've never seen anything like what you just did." The handshake was firm, professional, and carried the weight of recognition from one serious shooter to another. Around them, other participants began approaching, not with the condescending curiosity they'd shown before, but with the respect accorded to someone who had demonstrated mastery at the highest level. Even Viper Jackson approached, though his demeanor had changed completely from the cocky dismissiveness of previous days. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice lacking its usual bravado. "I made assumptions about your capabilities based on your equipment and background, what you've accomplished. It's exceptional." Isabella accepted the apology with quiet grace, understanding that Viper's change in attitude represented more than personal growth. It reflected a fundamental shift in how she was perceived within the elite shooting community. Master Chief Ramirez gathered the group around the record board, where Isabella's name was being officially added to the top of the list. "This achievement represents something important about the nature of precision shooting," he told the assembled participants. "Equipment matters, training matters, but fundamentals and natural ability matter more." He gestured to Isabella's modest rifle, which looked almost laughably basic compared to the high-end equipment surrounding it. "This rifle costs less than most of your scopes, but it's been maintained with precision and used by someone who understands its capabilities completely." The combination of proper fundamentals and absolute trust in her equipment produced results that technology alone couldn't achieve. The lesson wasn't lost on the other participants, many of whom had spent thousands of dollars on equipment while neglecting the basics that Isabella had mastered through years of careful practice. Later that day, as the course concluded with graduation ceremonies and final evaluations, Isabella found herself in the surreal position of being recruited by organizations she'd never imagined having contact with. The Army Marksmanship Unit representative made a formal offer for her to try out for their competitive team. Equipment manufacturers wanted to discuss sponsorship deals. Training schools offered instructor positions. But it was the conversation with Master Chief Ramirez that meant the most to her. "You've got a decision to make," he told her as they stood together looking at the record board. "This level of performance opens doors that most shooters never even see. You could pursue competitive shooting, military opportunities, or commercial sponsorships that would change your life completely." Isabella considered the options, thinking about the retail job she'd left behind, the financial struggles that had made this course such a significant investment, and the uncertain future that had driven her to attempt something so ambitious. "What would you recommend?" she asked. Ramirez smiled. "I'd recommend you remember what got you here. It wasn't expensive equipment or elite training programs. It was fundamentals, dedication, and the willingness to prove yourself when everyone expected you to fail." That evening, Isabella sat in her motel room with her phone ringing constantly. Reporters, sponsors, military recruiters, and training organizations all wanting to discuss opportunities that had been unimaginable a week before. But she found herself staring at her grandfather's old rifle case, thinking about the quiet lessons that had brought her this far. The transformation was remarkable. She'd arrived as an unknown veteran with modest equipment and enormous determination. She was leaving as someone whose name would be permanently associated with exceptional achievement in precision shooting. But more than the external recognition, Isabella felt a fundamental shift in how she saw herself. The quiet confidence that had sustained her through military service and civilian struggles had been validated at the highest level. She belonged in conversations about elite marksmanship not because of luck or accident, but because of skills she'd earned through years of dedicated practice. 3 months later, Staff Sergeant Isabella Morales reported to the Army Marksmanship Unit as their newest team member, bringing with her the same basic rifle that had shocked the shooting world. Her first competitive season included victories at national level, matches and qualification for international competition. But she never forgot the lesson learned at Camp Lejeune, that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. While others invested in equipment and technology, she continued to focus on the fundamentals that had made her exceptional. The record board at Camp Lejeune still displays her achievements: 0.15 MOA at 1,000 yards, with basic equipment under adverse conditions. It serves as a reminder to every shooter who sees it that precision comes from the person behind the rifle, not the price tag attached to it. Isabella's story became legendary in the precision shooting community, not just because of what she accomplished, but because of how she accomplished it. She proved that excellence was accessible to anyone willing to master the fundamentals, and that the most expensive equipment in the world couldn't replace dedication, practice, and quiet determination. Years later, when young shooters asked her for advice, Isabella would always return to the same principles her grandfather had taught her: master the basics, trust your equipment, and never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. Sometimes she would tell them, the most important shot you'll ever take is the one everyone expects you to miss. And sometimes, when you trust your training and ignore the noise, that shot will surprise everyone, including yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us,